Hi, I'm Rohini Nilekani, and my job is as a director with Xstep Foundation to enhance learning opportunities. And I'm also a writer, and I write many books for children. Yeah. Which child's interactions have remained with me? There are many because I've encountered hundreds of children as part of my work, but one or two that remain with me. One was in a tribal village in northern Karnataka when we went as part of Pratham Books, and we were distributing books. And actually, it happened to be a book that I had written. And one young boy, actually, he may have been about 8 or 9 years old, and he picked up the book in Kannada and he read it beautifully. And he was a very new early learner. He had just learned, even though he's 9 years old, he had just learned to read. And he read that book, and then he held it to his chest and looked at us proudly, and we clapped, and we went to look for the next child. But then he said, Nandu Agilla, he said, I haven't finished. Because then he picked up the English version of the same book and read it to us, more haltingly, but with equal amount of pride. And that stayed with me because it showed me that when you give children opportunities, they will grab them with both hands. And he wanted to show how much his potential was. And once he was given that, that roller coaster, he was just off like a rocket. So that was one of the things that has stayed with me for a while, that there's so much more to do. He could have had the same opportunity 5 years earlier if we had done more. So there's always more to do for more children who desperately need it. The question is, how do we create content that is truly inclusive? And I think that's a very deep question, because while there is a lot of pedagogy around the idea of inclusion, there is still a lot of work to be done to truly understand inclusion. And sometimes it's a personal journey to be made first. I myself have found that even though the intent is to be inclusive, many times I'm not able to be. And so perhaps the first step is to take that outer to inner journey first, together, maybe in a very nice collegial environment, and then take back the journey from inner to outer to define inclusion and to describe it joyfully together. So then that way, it's coming from a deeper place of the heart along with the conviction of the head.
Hello, I'm Deep Chingran, founder and executive director of the Language and Learning Foundation, or LLF. LLF works to improve students' foundational learning at scale in several states, working in collaboration with state governments. We work at the state level to improve learning materials, training programs, assessment practices, etc. We also work in certain districts to demonstrate how children's learning can be improved. These are usually aspirational districts, educationally disadvantaged, mostly rural districts, and children belong to a lower socioeconomic status in these districts. What comes to my mind when I think back on the most deprived groups of children that we have worked with is a set of children in a few districts of Haryana who belong to Purvanchali families. They are from eastern UP and Bihar. Their parents are daily wage laborers. They go back to their original home places for 2 or 3 months in a year. During COVID, their livelihoods were lost, their parents, and they went back for some time. Even when they came back, they did not have the documents like Aadhaar card, etc. They were not able to get the rations, which were given free at that time. They were actually at the brink of starvation. And we were running community classes at that time because of COVID. And many of these kids were not able to join, specifically because there wasn't even food to eat. Now, several such groups of children are in schools, in our government schools. And what we can look at as organizations that are creating academic content or instruction designs, I would have 2 suggestions. Number one, when making learning materials, provide for enough spiraling, revision, and reinforcement on regular intervals after school holidays, after every few units, in a few months' time, so that children who may not be regular get a chance to catch up. And the curriculum by itself, there is a lot of scope for extra practice. The second, the instructional design should have very simple formative assessment methods that teachers can use, identify struggling learners, and should provide for a time in the timetable, almost on a daily basis, for differentiated work for children who are struggling to learn. They could be supported by the teachers in small groups with some provision for extra practice, while other kids can do higher level work. So these two things can be kept in mind when we work with kids of the kind that I mentioned.
Hello, my name is Safina Hussain, and I'm the founder of Educate Girls. It's a nonprofit that is focused on the out-of-school girl, finding her, bringing her back into school, making sure that she is staying and learning. How we do this is that we go door to door and we find every single girl that's not going to school. Through community mobilization, ensure that she is enrolled in the closest government school, and then also running a remedial learning program called Gyan Ka Pitara, which does foundational literacy, numeracy in English, Hindi, and math, and life skills program for older girls. So all in all, we work across enrollment identification, enrollment, retention, and learning of girls from grade 1 to 8, and in some of the most rural, remote, and tribal areas. So currently in Rajasthan, Madhya Pradesh, UP, and Bihar. Most of our program is implemented in partnership with the government, but through our own employees, but also village-based community gender champions called Team Balika. And one of the things that, because we work in such remote areas, one of the things that we've always kind of focused on, 2 or 3 things actually, around content creation is, one, not forgetting the gender lens. And I think sometimes we're creating content, but we forget that content is also a tool for equity. So always making sure that whatever content we create, our girls are visible. And they're not visible in some regressive, norm or whatever, they're only cooking and while the boys are going to school, but really in a progressive way, because our content is a means also for mindset change and setting up new norms. Secondly, I think always making sure that you're building content for the last child. So making sure it's inclusive, for that last child who is struggling back in the classroom. So it's equitable, it's inclusive, and I think operationally, just making sure that it's simple. It's because a lot of our program is delivered through community volunteers, making sure that it is simple, it's very easy to implement, it's devoid of a lot of technical jargon, so that there's no complexity when it comes to the ground. So very simple instructions, etc. And that is also what then makes it really scalable and engaging for the children. So also just making sure that it brings a lot of joy into the classroom. So I wish you all the best for your incredible workshop, and you have the wonderful Sonali leading the way. So I'm sure you will have an amazing, amazing time. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Shabita Sharma Kukreja. I'm the CEO and Managing Director of Central Square Foundation. We work in partnership with governments for the implementation of India's foundational literacy and numeracy mission, Nipun Bharat. As a parent, I firmly believe talent is unlimited, but opportunities are limited. The true meaning of right to education should be an education which prepares all children for an equitable world, where children can look past the ovarian lottery towards a future which is equally available to every child, irrespective of the family she is born into. My urge to content creators is to think of a child that they've seen most in need. Could be a child in your neighborhood market, on a traffic signal begging, a child working on a railway platform, when she should actually be in a safe home or school environment learning. Create your content for her. And second, when creating content, please keep in mind the backward and forward linkages of the learning journey. Build on the skill, the lesson, the competency the child should have learned in her previous lesson and prepare her to engage with the content for the next learning. Thank you and good luck.
Hi, I'm Sanjay Purohit, Chief Curator of Societal Thinking at the XSTEP Foundation. I'm on a journey to understand how to leverage networks, innovation ecosystems, and technology to restore the agency, upgrade and strengthen the dignity, and enable choice for all the people of our societies. When I think about children, I'm reminded of my own childhood. I'm born in Rajasthan, so for my vacations, I used to go to Barmer, where my grandfather used to live. And at that time, 2 kids my age, very small, all of us, would come to our home to sing. They were folk singers, and they would use these pieces of earthen broken clay pieces and sing. And they were amazingly beautiful singers. And they would spend their evenings singing, then chit chat with us, have food with us, and go back. And as life takes its turns, today they are international performers. You would know them as Ranga Brothers. But my recollection is how delightful, how playful, how joyous those days, their days, our days used to be, because they were so immersed in their expression of a form of living that they had come up with. My suggestion or my recommendation or my submission to all of you as you focus on creating experiences for children is, please be a child when you make anything for a child. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Saurabh Banerjee. I am a senior advisor at Room to Read Global, an organization that has been working for the last 23 years on girls' education and early grade literacy. We work across 18 countries in the world, and in all of the countries we almost do the same thing, work on early literacy to build teachers' capacity on early literacy and have a life skills curriculum for girls that prepares them for lifelong learning and to face the challenges of life. Now, when you talk about content creation, of course, one of the things that I can talk about, I think of while developing any content. I mean, I'm moved by an incident that when I went to a school in a rural area of Madhya Pradesh, I faced this child who was like, she was from Barwani, and obviously, for most of our rural children, they do not have any exposure to text before they come to the school. So she was a child who was coming to the school first time. She has no exposure to text. And over and all, the language that the child spoke at home was not the language that was being taught at the school. So I think that almost resembles the challenge that we have in creating content for literacy. So what we need to look at while developing content is the fact that, you are dealing with a child who most probably have no exposure to text the first time she comes to school. So introducing text in the first place, and then progressively building on the skills as you go forward. You should also take into account the fact that in many cases, the language of the child will be very different from the language that's being taught in the school. So obviously, you have to give the child the space to integrate the child's own language into the school language, and slowly transition to the school language. The other thing that we take into account during content generation is, of course, the fact that in any classroom, there would be some slow learners and there would be some learners who are learning very fast. So how do you create your content in a way that you cater to this vast variety of learners, and it's not focused on one? You can always focus the majority of your content to the large part of the class, but there has to be some part of the content which caters to the slow learners and then caters to the first learners as well. So these are the key principles I would think of content generation.